All right, so welcome. We have Laura Waldo from the NAMP with us tonight to talk about scope of practice for holistic nutrition professionals, and I will pass it over to her.
Hello, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. What a great group we've got. So tonight I want to explain who I am and what I do. I am a practitioner. I'm an NTP. I'm also board certified in holistic nutrition. I graduated in all the years run together, 2012-ish. Opened my practice and realized, talking to a lot of practitioners, that their scope of practice was different than mine, because they were in either exclusive scope of practice states, what you guys kind of talk about as being red states, or title protection states. And I thought, this is just not right. We're all doing the same thing. We're all helping people. We want our clients to thrive. So I kind of stepped into this advocacy role. And here I am today in 2024 doing the same thing, still holding down my practice, which is wonderful. And so I want to talk to you tonight about how you can work and still stay in your lane, keeping our scope of practice alive, and not get in trouble. So that's kind of where we are. As David said, he's not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. If you have very, very specific questions, I want to make sure that you see the right person, whether that be a CPA, whether that be an attorney who specializes in nutrition law or business law. So I'm just going to state that up front, so everybody knows that I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a holistic nutrition professional like the rest of you. All right. And it is not moving. There we go. So there's my little disclaimer. I'm not a lawyer. I think we all have that now. So I want to talk about our scope of practice. I want to talk about, there's a lot of confusion over license versus certification versus consulting versus coaching. And what does it mean to be board certified in holistic nutrition? As well as to point you to the right direction when you've got questions about the law in your state. We've put together the NANP Legislative Affairs Map, and that's going to give you all the information that you need, plus links to the actual law for those who really want to try to read that. Always a little bit frustrating when you start reading legislation because it's not written in normal English. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. So what is our scope of practice? We should all know this. We eat, live, and breathe our scope of practice. But when we define scope of practice, we have to look at the responsibilities that set the practice guidelines. And these are what determine our boundaries. So for holistic nutrition professionals, we know that we do not diagnose, treat, cure, heal, prescribe, deprescribe, manage, or mitigate any disease state in our clients. So when we're looking at a healthcare profession, a doctor has his scope of practice, psychologist has his or her scope of practice, dietitians have their scope of practice, and in many states, certified nutrition specialists also have a very specific scope of practice. And then we hear the term frequently, what is medical nutrition therapy? We cannot practice medical nutrition therapy. So what does that mean technically? Well, I've been working with the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics for 6 years now, and we finally came up with what is medical nutrition therapy. And it is the provision of nutrition care services for the treatment or management of a disease or medical condition. So this is now something that's being put in all legislation. There may be some nuances to this verbiage, but it is this provision for nutrition care that the AND has been using and will continue to use. So, as holistic nutrition professionals, what do? We're going to recommend, we're going to suggest, we're going to support, we're going to guide our clients to a healthy, nutrient-dense whole food diet. We can use terms like this when we're working with our clients. And one thing that I always do in my practice is to say, studies have shown, or research supports. And I always provide those studies and that research to back up my claim. And this gives my clients a strong feeling that I have their best interest at heart. So things that we don't want to use when we're talking to our clients, we don't want to diagnose, we don't want to treat, we don't want to cure. We're not trying to prevent, prescribe, heal, manage, or mitigate any disease. Thus, our scope of practice. And then we have the issue of what is a credential? What is a certificate? What is a license? So let's try to go through some of these and kind of wheel this in a bit. So when we're talking about a credential, we're talking about a document or verification process that gives a detailed outline of our qualification, experience, or competence. And this is always issued by a third-party organization. So we've got our diplomas, we've got degrees, and we have certifications. So the license, this is where it gets interesting. Some states provide licenses to certified nutrition specialist. All states will provide a license to a doctor or a psychologist. But when we look at a license, we're looking at something that's issued by the state. Usually, when we're talking about health, we're talking about the Board of Health, and they are responsible for issuing those licenses. So they're very, very tight protocols on what will allow you to be licensed in a state. So it's got to be from a very specified certified program. It's got to meet certification requirements for the national organization. So like the AMA, there's got to be a specific number of hours of training that's been accomplished. There's the practical exam that must be covered and continuing education and typically hands-on hours. So 500, 1,000, 1,500 hours. Excuse me, trying not to get my son's cold. So certification, we're talking about a credential that's earned by a legitimacy and competency that shows that you can perform the job that you have learned. So certification is awarded after you've passed the proper assessments that are administered by the recognized third party. Certificate. So when we're talking about certificates, we're talking about things like the NTP, FNTP. These are granted when you successfully complete a certificate program, which provides you with the specialized education that you need to strengthen your career skills. So when we're talking about the certificate, it's the physical representation that the individual has fulfilled the requirements for that program. So you've passed the midterm, you've passed the final, you've done your education, and you've received your certificate. And I'm also going to mention here, people ask about titles that they can use. So when you graduate from a program, you're going to use the title that appears on your certificate or on your diploma. So for instance, if I was an engineer, I would use my engineer title. If I was IEEE certified, I would use that title. If I'm an NTP, I will use that title. And that goes for all states. So then we get into the issues of what's the difference between consulting versus coaching. As NTPs, as graduates of David's program, we're using our skills to consult with all of our clients. So a nutrition consultant is trained in holistic nutrition. We use evidence-based, science-based education to emphasize the building of health. And we approach it from a unique and individual perspective. So one-on-one, we're looking at each person as a bio individual. Health coaches have a little bit different scope of practice. So when we look at a health coach, they're allowed to be a partner with their client who's seeking self-directed changes, lifestyle changes. Some things, that we do will overlap with that of a health coach, but there's a big difference. Their scope of practice does not allow them to individualize nutrition plans. It does not allow them to make recommendations for supplements, and it really does not allow them to look with a critical eye at labs. So those are the big differences that we see versus a holistic nutrition consultant and a health coach. So what is board certified in holistic nutrition? It is a credential, and it demonstrates that the holistic nutrition professional has achieved the highest level of professional recognition and validation of the knowledge that they've earned and gained over the years and their experience. So it shows when I'm talking to our legislators, one of the things they ask is, what's the difference between somebody who's board certified in holistic nutrition? What's the difference between that and a health coach and a certified nutrition specialist and a dietitian? There is a big difference. But what we can say with the BCHN credential, the board certified in holistic nutrition credential, is that we've undergone the same barriers as other health professions. We've received a standardized education. We've passed the national board exam. We stay current with our education by earning 15 continuing education units each year. And there is a credentialing process. I don't know if any of you have been through that process, but we have to have 500 hours, not as much as an RD who gains 1,000 hours, but we do need to have those hours. They do need to be validated. So there's a very thorough process that we go through to make sure that everybody is vetted and prepared to be board certified in holistic nutrition. And why is this important? Number one, when I talk to legislators, they need to know that we are on solid ground, that we're working under our scope of practice. We have ethics policies that we follow, but most importantly, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics and the American Nutrition Association passed legislation in 2019 with a template. And in that template, it said, people who are not us, people who are not licensed, may not work and use their title. So what they did was they took a subset of titles that some of our schools provide, and they made those illegal to use by passing this legislation. So as an NTP, as an NTC, there were multiple titles that were used and passed in this legislation. What they could not do is to say, if you have a federally trademarked title, you are not allowed to use it because it is federally trademarked. And the legislators said, absolutely not. If it's federally trademarked, they've earned that credential, and we will put that in the law. So we've seen that going forward. I've been working with the legislators. I've been working with external organizations to make sure that we can use our titles that we've earned. It is a long process. It is a difficult process, but as a holistic nutrition professional, it's first and foremost in my mind. But what you can do is become board certified in holistic nutrition if the law changes as it did in New Jersey in 2019. You may still use that federally trademarked title of BCHN, board certified in holistic nutrition, to show that you have the education and skills to work with your clients. Okay, David, I have a feeling this is going to be a hot topic. So, what is telehealth? Technically speaking, telehealth is defined as the use of electronic information and telecommunication technologies that support long-distance clinical health care, patient and professional-related education, health administration, and public health. The key here is healthcare. So we are not licensed. We do not provide health care. So we need to be very mindful when we're trying to practice over state lines that we're not overstepping our bounds. Which brings up the legislative affairs map. When we talk about red, yellow, green, what we're actually referring to is exclusive scope of practice states, title protection states, and those states that don't have a Dietetics Practice Act, or they certify dietitians and sometimes CNSs to work with clients. The big reason that the A&D pushes for licensure is not necessarily to be wicked and evil, but so that they can work with insurance companies and bill to insurance companies. If they're in a state that has a certification law, they can't bill to Blue Cross Blue Shield or Aetna. So it makes it difficult. So this is the reason that they have pushed very, very hard to make sure that they have licensure in every state. So when we look at the map, and this is what you'll see when you go to the NANP website, it is interactive. You click on the state that you're interested in moving to or that you currently live in, and it will give you the title, the exemptions, and explain how the law works in that state. So, when we look, I've been working very, very hard with the NANP support to take all of these exclusive scope of practice states and change those laws to give us a level playing field so that we can work within our scope of practice. I wish I could say that it only took 2 or 3 weeks to get these laws changed, but unfortunately it can take 3, 4, 5, 6 years to change a law, depending on the state that you're working in. It took 3 years to get Missouri to change from an exclusive scope of practice state to a title protection state. But our advocates out there are thriving, and they're really relishing the fact that they are able to now work within their scope of practice. The AND also has a difficult time changing laws. New York, which is currently a certification state, has been a target for the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics for 6 years. To this date, the law still has not changed. So this is what we run into, and this is just part of working with legislators. So this is the address where you can find the legislative affairs map. Take a look at it. Members of the NANP are always welcome to give me a call, to schedule a call. I provide one-on-one consultations. We can walk through the laws of your state. We can talk about advocacy efforts, how you can help. And, it works famously. I talk to hundreds of practitioners every year and meet them for the first time sometimes at the NANP conference, HealCon, and it's always a great time. So I went through this quickly because I wanted to give you all plenty of time to ask questions. So I'm going to do my best to do that. And just a reminder, think and really think before you speak to a client, before you speak to a potential client. So we're there to support. We can say that our supplements may benefit. Studies have shown, but we're not going to diagnose, treat, cure, heal, prevent, prescribe, deprescribe, manage, or mitigate any disease state. If you have a website, if you're going to develop a website, please have another practitioner look at it who understands our scope of practice, or do a self-audit. Look at what you're saying and make sure that you're working within the scope of practice. We know from the past that there are people who will search for websites of holistic nutrition professionals to find that they're working outside of the scope of practice. They used to run sting operations with the Board of Health. They're doing that less, but they will look. And the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics has what they call harm reports. So if you're working outside of your scope of practice and they find you, it's written up as a harm report, and it's very possible that you'll receive a cease and desist letter. So just trying to protect everybody out there. So always, if you can, provide research and documentation to your clients. There's nothing wrong with sharing firsthand success stories with your clients. Tell them about your story. Tell them about a client without mentioning any particular name or date or anything that would give somebody the information about your client. Make sure that your waiver, disclaimer, consent forms are signed by your clients. And if in doubt, defer and refer your client to a licensed medical provider, whether that be a dietitian, whether that be a CNS who's licensed in your state, or a medical doctor. These are all things that we need to do as holistic nutrition professionals. So now I want to leave this open because I know David told me that you guys had a ton of questions.
Yeah, that was great, Laura. Great tips for how to speak to clients. I think you did an awesome job highlighting the benefits of getting that BCHN credential, right, guys? It's federally trademarked. You can use it. We do have a couple questions about that, I think. And Laura, you might be able to, let me pull up the chat here. Speak to this a little bit since you're an NTP. Some of them are wondering, can they still call themselves an NTP with that new legislation that's been passed in New Jersey?
It depends on the state. In those states where that law has passed, that title is no longer allowed to be used. What you can do is you can hang your certificate. You can explain to your client that you're a nutritional therapy practitioner. You can explain to your client what that means. But if you've got a business card, or if it's on your website, you really want to use the BCHN title.
Yeah, great. Um, the Legislative Affairs Interactive Map, is that fully up to date on the NAMP website, Laura?
It is up to date.
Okay.
There are tweaks that I want to make, but it is reflective. And I want to make sure that everybody listening knows, don't go out to the American Nutrition Association, the ANA. That map has been developed for certified nutrition specialists who do qualify for licensure in several states. So when we're talking about holistic nutrition professionals, we're talking about the NANP Legislative Affairs Map. That is the only up-to-date map that deals specifically with unlicensed holistic nutrition professionals.
Great. Yeah, Corinne in the chat said the New Jersey scope is different on the NAMP website than the map that was just shared. Is New Jersey now title protection, Laura?
It is title protection.
Okay, great.
And if there's a boo-foo, it's because they've done a revamp of the website. And Corinne, I will take a look at that. And make
Laura, it
sure
was
that it's correct.
actually the one that was just shared in the presentation might have been outdated because that said exclusive scope. But the one on the website was correct.
Yeah, the one on the website is correct. So that may have just been a mistake on the link.
No
No
worries.
worries at all. Yep.
We'll make sure that we get that one corrected.
Cool. Yeah, we got a couple people in Jersey. Oh, here's a good one, Laura. We talked a little bit about this on the phone last week. Should we talk about Florida a little bit?
Oh, yeah, let's talk about Florida. Florida, right? Um, Florida's an interesting state. So way back when, I worked on a campaign with the Florida legislature to change that law from exclusive scope. The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics had a stronghold in the state. So I worked for about 2 years and then got moved over to a different campaign working with legislators. The law that passed is not optimal, but it does allow you to work. Unfortunately, the way the wording of the law is written, you need to be extremely cautious when you are doing a discovery call with a prospective client. You need to find out if they are under the care of a licensed medical provider, if they have been given. So for instance, let's say a person calls you and they say, yeah, my doctor prescribed metformin and I'm supposed to be on a very specific diet. You are hands off. The law states you cannot work with somebody who has a medical condition and has been prescribed a dietary intervention. So please, please, please make sure that you find out from your client, prospective client, if they have been prescribed a diet by a licensed provider. This will keep you safe and it will help your client or future client know that you know your scope of practice.
That's really
Does that make sense, guys? Does that? I know it's a really strange law.
It's odd. I guess that's the first question they should really ask clients in Florida then, right, Laura?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Have you been prescribed a diet by your doctor, by your dietitian, by your CNS? Anytime that happens, you need to say, then I can't work with you, but I'd love to refer you to so-and-so.
Here's an interesting one from one of my Purdue students. Does the BCHN credential cover functional or integrative medicine, or are those different credentials?
Those are different credentials. Yeah, we are not, the credential that we have is strictly for holistic nutrition professionals and meets our scope of practice. But functional medicine, integrative medicine, that falls under a different scope of practice. Naturopaths fall under a different scope of practice. So they have their own guidelines that they follow, and the laws differ in each state. And that's one of the frustrating things, guys. Every state legislature makes their own law. So, you may be in Texas and think, well, I'm just going to work in Arkansas, but the laws are different. So always double check those laws to make sure you're within your scope of practice.
Corinne, can you touch on out of country clients? I have quite a few that I see overseas via Zoom. Interesting, Corinne.
It is interesting, Corinne. It's something that I'm working on, but working out of country, you really need to get a better handle on the country that you're working with. Whether it be Germany or Italy, you need to be well versed in the law there. Technically, when we're working, we need to follow the scope of practice of the law that is the state in which our business is registered, the state in which we live. So I'm going to ask you to err on the side of caution. I am working with external groups to get clarification. It is hard fought when it comes to working over state lines. Even lawyers that I've spoken to are totally hands off, and they're like, we don't know what to tell you. We don't know what to say. We don't know what to tell our clients when they ask about working over state lines. The difference is if you're licensed, you can fall under what they call the compact laws. What we're seeing and what we've seen a lot of since COVID is laws that are written so that a doctor can work in New Jersey and Maryland and wherever his license is can be accepted in another state. So those are called compact laws. We don't qualify for that because we're not licensed. So I'm working hard. I'm hoping to have some really solid information put out in the next month or so. And it will be on our website for how to practice over state lines and where you can do that.
That's great, Laura. Yeah, thanks for working on this, by the way. And I'll be sure to get that information from Laura, guys, in the coming months as they publish it on their website. We have a NTPer in our program, Agna, and she's in Alabama, Laura, which is an exclusive scope of practice state where she's not allowed to technically customize meal plans, etc. And she's curious, as an NTP, okay, so she's saying, as an NTP, we were trained to provide recommendation forms after the visits. How can I provide recommendation forms specific to a client without infringing on this Alabama law?
Yeah, Alabama's another kind of tough state. I'm working on it. It's getting a little bit better. But what you're going to want to do is you're going to have to not make specific recommendations, but general nutrition recommendations. Anytime you're in an exclusive scope of practice state, the recommendations you provide are going to be general in nature and backed up by science, whether that be PubMed or a book or a medical journal. You're going to keep your recommendations within that purview. So you can't say, my experience tells me that you need to eat more cruciferous vegetables. You're going to point to the documentation that says cruciferous vegetables help people who have XYZ. So that's the type of thing that you're going to do. Don't personalize it. Just make very general nutrition recommendations, and you'll be within your scope of practice for the state of Alabama or any exclusive scope.
Great. I asked a couple of you guys in the chat to rephrase your questions. I was a bit confused. So I'm going to hop down a few here.
Okay.
Let's see.
And keep bringing it on, guys.
Yeah. I just need you guys to rephrase a little bit. Okay, Brenda, great. So from my understanding, we have to follow the legislative rules in the state your client resides or the state that your business is registered in.
The state in which you reside. So if you're in Ohio, you need to follow the laws of Ohio. So where you live, where you pay taxes, where you register your vehicle, that is the state in which you follow the law. Your client state is less important, but you need to be aware to make sure you're within your scope of practice. So always follow the law of the state in which you reside.
Do you have any information on Puerto Rico, Laura?
Puerto Rico, no. I'm happy to look into it because I know the only reason I say that is I know there were some changes going on there, and it was actually a little more restrictive. It was
Great.
becoming more restrictive. Let's put it that way.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, something to monitor, guys. Do a little digging and see if you can find something. So Amanda lives over in Japan. She's a military spouse, and she's not on a normal work visa in Japan. She has really no idea what state laws to follow. Her guess was to follow whatever state her client lives in, but I also have local US citizen clients, not all Japanese clients. So how would you advise a US citizen, not on a visa in Japan, but living over there to function as a holistic nutritionist?
Right. So to function as a holistic nutrition professional in Japan, you are probably okay. And the reason I say this is because almost all legislation has an exemption, and that exemption is for military spouses. This came about when we were working in Florida, when I was working on the legislation in Florida. The legislators felt that impeding the right of a spouse, a military spouse, was abhorrent. So almost all laws, almost all states have a waiver for military spouses. I would ask you to be very cautious. I would ask you, Amanda, to let people know what your credential is, what your certificate is. Where did you register your company before you and your husband were transferred to Japan? So technically that is where you should be working from. Those are the laws that you should follow.
Great. It might be Delaware. You can put the state in the chat, Amanda, or you're welcome to come off mute too. Here's a question from Alicia. Can you customize meal plans in title protection states?
You may, but just be aware because every state is different. So always look at the map. Sorry, guys, I'm harping on it. You must always be aware because there are tweaks in every single state. Every legislature has a different point of view, but in title protection states, as the name implies, you must be cautious of the title that you use. You do not want to refer to yourself or imply that you are licensed, that you are certified by the state, that you're a dietitian, that you're a licensed dietitian, that you're a nutritionist. None of us are nutritionists unless we have completed the CNS program. So we're not going to use the title nutritionist. But then you're in good shape. So in each of those states that are title protected or exclusive scope, I list out very clearly what titles you may not use. So look that over, make sure you're not using those titles, and then go help your clients thrive, make recommendations for a nutrient-dense whole food diet.
Yeah, I think it's helpful too, Laura, for these folks to maybe have a disclaimer on their website. I am not X, Y, and Z, and then stating
Always.
what they are. Yeah, that would be safe, guys, to have that.
And if you're an influencer, we've seen this rollerball effect from the Federal Trade Commission. There was a huge story in the Washington Post about a month ago. So if you are a social media person, an influencer, if you get a coupon from a company, disclaim that. Make sure that if you're writing a blog post, people know that you have received compensation. Even if you haven't received monetary compensation, but you're giving a company a shout out, make sure that people know there's any kind of conflict of interest there. The FTC is starting to really crack down. The fines were exorbitant. $10,000 for the first infraction. And that was for a person. That was for an RD. The company that was caught up in this had over $1 million fine. So make sure that your waiver, your disclaimers are signed. Make sure every page of your website clearly has your disclaimer on it. And then again, if you've got a blog, if you are touting Beauty Counter, make sure that you are letting those people know out there in the world or your clients that you're a Beauty Counter rep or you're an MLM person. So just make sure you're being upfront.
Jordan's wondering how they volunteered to help you to help change legislation in red states.
Members of the NANP are absolutely welcome to join me. There are very small steps that we take, and there are huge steps we take. One of the first things that I tell people who want to learn about advocacy is I'll have a one-on-one with you, and we'll kind of talk through the process. But start small, start local. If you're in an exclusive scope of practice state, talk to your local representative, make an appointment. They're people just like you and I, and most of them have no idea that you're not able to work up to your level of education in their state. So, we can talk through talking points, and then you can just start at that level, and it builds. One practitioner talks to another practitioner, and we build this groundswell. We refer to it as grassroots advocacy, and this is the way we change laws. We don't have super expensive affiliates and lobbyists to do this work. We need to do it for ourselves, and what a sense of accomplishment it is when it's taken care of.
So back to Florida, Laura. Yeah. So I think there's a question here from an NTP, Alicia, in regards to what you meant by the prescription. And so she's wondering if, does that mean a doctor wrote down a prescription or just told their client to change their diet?
The law is very fluky and it is not clear, but the way that the law is worded, if somebody has been provided by a medical doctor, by a licensed provider, a diet intervention, then they are hands off. And I know that's tough, guys, because I've been in Florida. I've spent a lot of time in Florida. I lived in Florida. I know that there is a tremendous amount of pre-diabetic and diabetic people in Florida. So, you're just going to have to kind of bite your finger there. Just ask, are you on prescription medication for dietary changes? Have you been working with your doctor on dietary changes? Did your doctor suggest dietary changes? If so, technically that person is hands off. Now, there's a caveat here. One thing that you can do, and this is something that I always do anyway, ask that client, prospective client, if they would mind if you worked with their licensed provider. We all know that most MDs don't have a nutrition background. They're over their head. They give somebody a pamphlet that says, if you're on metformin, if you have type 2 diabetes, this is the diet that you should be eating. Or they send you to a dietitian. So in that case, you can ask if you can work with their doctor and that doctor can approve your recommendations. Always have the doctor approve, review recommendations, but this will keep you within your scope of practice in those tough states.
Great advice there, Laura. Are you familiar with Rupa Health? Any thoughts on that? I know we talked lab tests a little on the phone the other day.
Yeah. So the beautiful thing about Rupa Health and Avexia Diagnostics is that they are laboratory clearinghouses. So you don't have to go and say, I need to get my person to have a prescription for this test. We can get those tests. Technically, we're not ordering the test. Dr. Bland is ordering the test. Dr. Comanche is ordering the test. So we're not ordering the test. It takes us out of that chain of command, which brings up the other topic. You can order that test for your client. You can review that test for your client, but you must be cautious about diagnosing that client when you review their test results, or trying to heal your client or treat your client based on those test results. So anytime we're looking at a test result, again, if that person is under the care of a licensed medical provider, you can jot down notes on the test and say, I'd like you to take this to your doctor. This is what I would recommend. This is what I see. So follow up with your licensed medical provider. Just make sure and just do a self-check. We're not diagnosing somebody when we look at a lab. We're not treating somebody, and we're not trying to heal them, because that would be outside of our scope of practice. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah, put it in the chat, or you're welcome to come off mute if any lab questions pertaining to that. We have a couple here. I'll kind of lump them together pertaining to the affiliates topic we were talking about. Does that go for Fullscript as well, Laura?
The affiliates, as far as
if you're getting compensation from a company.
So with places like Fullscript, that's a little bit different. What I'm really focused on is the things that the Federal Trade Commission is worried about, and that would be promoting a product, promoting a very specific lab, that type of thing. So we just want to use caution when we're dealing with that. The affiliate, you're not saying you must get your supplement through Fullscript. You're giving them the opportunity, but you're not technically selling Fullscript to your client.
Jen's wondering too, if she's an affiliate of a company and she's promoting products from that company, should she be putting a disclaimer somewhere?
Absolutely. Front and center.
There you go, Jen.
So there is NAMP members received this a couple of months ago, but there is a document that has been written by the FTC, and it tells you exactly step by step what to do. But what you're going to want to do is you are going to want to announce that on your site that you are an affiliate. so that everybody knows. And David, I'm going to get you a link to that document so that you can share it with the community.
That would be helpful, Laura. I think, obviously, I think I had it in my bioethics class in my doctorate, but I don't know if I saved the link anywhere. So that would be really helpful.
Yeah, this one is brand new. They
Okay, yeah,
just came out with it. So it's very, very clear. It's written like computer science for dummies 101. So
perfect.
I'll get that to you. You share that with everybody. And again, if there are questions, let me know.
Great. We got time for just a couple more, and I think we're just about through the chat here. Kelly's wondering if she is working virtually with someone who resides in Florida. And Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not in Florida, right? You're in New Jersey, and you practice out of another state. Okay. Do you still need to abide by that Florida law we've been talking about?
That's a tough one because it
Mhm.
leaves you open to question. So if somebody says, well, my friend Janet is working with somebody who lives in New Jersey or another state, and she's getting better, but then she took a downturn and had to go see her doctor, and the doctor referred her to a dietitian, and Janet, your client, tells the dietitian she was working with you, then technically you could receive a harm report. You could receive a cease and desist. It's not clear when we're working over state lines what is the limit. And this is why I've been working so hard over the past few years to get clarification from lawmakers. But every state has their own telehealth law, and some states don't even have a law yet. So just be very, very cautious. Make sure that your waiver and disclaimer have been signed. And anytime you feel that something is outside of your scope of practice, please refer them to a licensed provider or work with that client's licensed provider.
One more question here and we'll try kind of wrap up. Okay, so Alicia down in Florida, she's an NTP and she was approved by Mosaic Diagnostics to order tests. Can I do this? Is she permitted to do this with her in this scope of practice?
If Mosaic Diagnostics allows you to open an account with them, then you are allowed to order those tests in the state of Florida. Just remember, we're not using them to diagnose, treat, cure, or heal any client. When we look at labs, it's for informational purposes and to help guide us to help our clients thrive. Really, that's the key, guys.
Yeah, Laura, I was talking to, it might have been Jen, and how when we were chatting on the phone, me and you, you mentioned to me how you were asked once, why do you need to, what do you do with tests, right? Like, what do you do? And I told Jen your answer, right? To see the big picture so you can better support your clients nutritionally within your scope. So yeah, great tips today from Laura, guys. I loved the tips on how to properly speak to your clients, those keywords to use and the keywords to avoid. I think a great tip is to also start collaborating with licensed practitioners, which it could kind of protect you a little bit more. I think another key takeaway was let's get those disclaimers up on your websites, on your social media. And some of you have obtained that BCHN credential. I know Corinne. I think Jen is just about there. I think Donna's just about there. A lot of you are just about there. So keep pushing for that. That is federally trademarked. A lot of great information. If you have follow-up questions, you can email them to me. I'll see what I can do, and maybe I'll pass them along. I'll kind of lump them into their topics. If there's a lot of comment questions, I'll pass them over to Laura at some point. But yeah, thank you, Laura, so much for taking the time
Thank you,
tonight.
everyone.
This is so
Have
beneficial.
a great evening. Thank you for having me, David.
Absolutely, Laura. This was great. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Bye-bye.
All right.